with carrying out a $100 million fraud scheme, distributing more than 40 million pills of Adderall and other prescription stimulants.
America, the founder and CEO of Dun Global, a California-based telehealth company, just got convicted in what prosecutors are calling a $100 million Adderall distribution scheme that illegally dispensed over 40 million pills to patients who didn't even need them. Ruth He and clinical president David Brody turned what was supposed to be legitimate ADHD treatment into a massive pill mill that exploited C-19 telehealth rules to flood American communities with dangerous stimulants. But here's what's really disturbing. They specifically targeted drug seekers through social media ads and paid nurse practitioners up to 60 grand a month to rubber stamp prescriptions without proper medical evaluations. Because here's what nobody wants to talk about. This case exposes how telehealth companies exploited the pandemic regulations to create sophisticated drug distribution networks that operated like digital pill mills.
Morgan, get this, a California-based telehealth company that prescribed Adderall and other stimulants online is now being accused of being a massive pill distributor for patients who were seeking these drugs. And that website, it is called Dun.
What is up, guys? TYSON DELACRUZ here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. This conviction shows exactly what happens when profit-driven companies exploit healthcare regulations to push dangerous drugs on vulnerable Americans. Let me start with breaking news that just sent shockwaves through the telehealth industry. After a 5-day trial in San Francisco, a federal jury convicted Ruth He on multiple counts of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, bribery, and conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. This represents the first criminal drug distribution prosecution related to telemedicine prescribing in U.S. history. He was convicted alongside David Brody, Dun's clinical president, making this the highest-ranking corporate conviction in the telehealth industry.
The Justice Department says they raked in more than $100 million by giving internet users easy access to those medications in exchange for a monthly subscription fee.
This wasn't healthcare. This was a subscription-based drug dealing operation disguised as telemedicine. Over 40 million pills of Adderall and other prescription stimulants were distributed whether or not the patients actually qualified for them. Think about that scale. 40 million pills flooding American communities from one telehealth company that was supposed to be providing legitimate medical services. Now, before we dive deeper on how this telehealth scheme operated, I need to talk to you about something that's going to shock you. While we're watching these criminals exploit healthcare systems to push drugs, there's another massive exploitation happening to every single one of us, and it's putting us at risk for identity theft and fraud every single day. Look at this 11-page report showing exactly what data brokers know about me. They have my medical history, my prescription information, my insurance details, my home address, my family members, everything a criminal would need to steal my identity or commit healthcare fraud. And here's the terrifying part. They're selling this information to anyone willing to pay for it. When I Google my own name, look at all these data broker sites claiming to sell my personal information. It makes me furious that these companies are making billions selling our most sensitive data without our consent and making zero effort to stop scammers, fraudsters, and criminals from buying it. Think about it. While Dun was exploiting telehealth systems to push drugs, criminals are using our own personal data sold by data brokers to commit medical identity theft, insurance fraud, and prescription drug scams. How does it make you feel that your private medical information is being sold to the highest bidder? That is why I'm partnered with today's sponsor, Aura. Aura protects your privacy by identifying data brokers selling your information and automatically removing it from these sites. But unlike other services that offer this, Aura gives you way more protection for the same price. You get alerts if your personal information is found on the dark web, real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, 24/7 monitoring to help you keep your identity secure, a secure VPN, antivirus, password management, and much, much more. Plus, they have US-based support available around the clock. And if anything does happen, Aura includes $5 million in identity theft insurance protection with US fraud experts ready to help 24/7. You can try Aura for free for 14 days at aura.com/Tyson DELACRUZ. That is absolutely enough time for Aura to start scrubbing your personal information off these data broker sites without you even lifting a finger. I'm not leaving even myself vulnerable to data brokers and healthcare fraudsters, and you shouldn't either. Now let me show you exactly how sophisticated this telehealth drug scheme really was. Now let me break down the sophisticated marketing scheme that Dunn used to target drug seekers and people who didn't actually have ADHD. They spent over $40 million on deceptive social media advertisements, specifically designed to convince people that they needed Adderall.
Adderall, Ritalin, Vyvanse are all highly addictive, highly addictive drugs. They're being prescribed more than ever.
And Dunn was specifically targeting people who wanted these substances for non-medical reasons. They weren't treating ADHD, they were feeding addiction.
People have been prescribed these medications and, need to be continued on the medications. We've started to run into problems with supply. Because the DEA ultimately controls how much of these medications are manufactured.
The overprescribing by companies like Dunn created supply shortages that affected legitimate ADHD patients who actually needed these medications. While Dunn was flooding the market with unnecessary prescriptions, real patients couldn't get their medication.
There's a lot of reasons, right? So one of it is for cognitive enhancement. And it gives them the belief that they can, focus in better.
They knew their customers weren't legitimate ADHD patients. They were drug seekers looking for easy access to controlled substances. Here's where this scheme gets really disturbing. Dunn paid nurse practitioners around the country up to $60,000 per month to essentially rubber stamp prescriptions without conducting proper medical evaluations.
Prospective patients would just click on a link embedded in one of these ads, and it would take them to a very brief survey. They say it takes about a minute to fill out.
The medical evaluations consist of clicking a link and filling out a 1-minute survey. That is not a medical assessment. That is an online order form for controlled substances. Real ADHD evaluations take hours and involve comprehensive psychological testing.
The company pressured these clinicians to offer these prescriptions to patients regardless of whether or not they actually believed they had ADHD.
They took advantage of emergency healthcare measures designed to help patients and turned them into a criminal enterprise. One of the most shocking aspects of Dunn's operation was their auto refill system. According to federal prosecutors, Dunn enabled an auto refill technology feature where patients could receive prescriptions without clinical interaction for years based on auto-generated emails sent each month. This completely eliminated medical oversight and turned prescription refills into an automatic drug distribution system. The auto refill system was so automated that it issued prescriptions for deceased patients, dead people. When your drug distribution system is so disconnected from medical care that dead people are getting prescriptions, you are not running a healthcare company. You are running a criminal enterprise.
The amount of time that many of these services spend on evaluating patients and actually doing the workup and seeing, is this truly ADHD? That time has really decreased.
Dunn didn't just illegally distribute drugs. They also defrauded insurance companies out of over $14 million by submitting false prior authorization requests and lying about their medical practices, claiming they followed proper diagnosis procedures and utilized urine drug screenings when they actually did none of that. They lied to insurance companies to get reimbursements for legitimate prescriptions. They falsely claimed that non-stimulant medications have been tried without success, when the reality was they were pushing stimulants as first treatment to maximize profits.
The DOJ alleges Dunn targeted drug seekers and exacerbated a nationwide shortage of Adderall, first declared in 2022.
The impact of Dunn's criminal operation extends far beyond the company itself. The scheme was exposed. Approximately 50,000 patients were left scrambling to find new healthcare providers for their medication needs. This shows the massive scale of Dunn's operation and the disruption caused when it was shut down.
The ones that were using this digital health to get their Adderall, first of all, they probably weren't having the right diagnoses in a lot of cases, right?
This means thousands of people were taking powerful stimulants without actually having ADHD.
When you can't get the drug in the amount that you want, having the inconsistent flow can really mess with your brain.
Dunn created thousands of people who were dependent on medications that they didn't actually need, then left them without proper medical support when the scheme collapsed. When federal investigators started closing in, Ruth He didn't just try to cover up the evidence. She attempted to obstruct justice by moving operations to China and trying to flee the country, limiting communications on company platforms and using encrypted messaging apps with disappearing messages. She deleted incriminating documents that showed Dunn was encouraging providers to prescribe Adderall, even to patients who didn't have ADHD. He transferred over $1 million to a Chinese shell company called Make Believe Asia and conducted internet searches for countries without extradition treaties. The Dunn conviction represents a broader reckoning for the telehealth industry, which exploded during the pandemic but has been plagued by companies that prioritize profits over patient care.
It's a double-edged sword for sure, because on the one hand, it's great that we have more access to care for people who may not have been able to access care before.
It also makes it much, much easier to get medications prescribed improperly.
You can't imagine why a for-profit business that makes their money selling drugs would possibly reduce the time that they spend talking to people to see if they need them.
Dunn's business model was designed to maximize prescriptions, not provide proper medical care. Ruth He and David Brody now face serious federal prison time for their roles in a massive drug distribution scheme. Sentencing is scheduled for February 25th, 2026, and they could receive up to 20 years in federal prison. The fact that this represents the first criminal prosecution for telemedicine drug distributions means it will likely serve as a precedent for future cases against similar companies. The $100 million in revenue that Dunn generated shows the massive profits available to companies willing to exploit healthcare regulation. But the criminal convictions show that these profits come with some serious legal risks. America, the conviction of Ruth He and David Brody represents a watershed moment for telehealth accountability. For too long, companies like Dunn have exploited pandemic regulations to create sophisticated drug distribution networks that prioritize profits over patient safety. $100 million in revenue from distributing 40 million pills to patients who didn't actually need them shows the massive scale of this criminal enterprise. This wasn't healthcare. This was drug dealing with a medical license. The auto refill system that issued prescriptions to deceased patients, the targeting of drug seekers through social media ads, and the payments of nurse practitioners to rubber stamp prescriptions all demonstrate a complete abandonment of medical ethics. The telehealth industry can provide legitimate benefits to patients who need access to care, but companies that abuse these systems to create digital pill mills will face the full force of federal prosecution. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.